If any questions come up during Kim's presentation, go ahead and pop them in the chat. And you can keep your cameras on or off however you feel most comfortable. And take it away. Thanks, Chad.
All right, so this event this evening is being presented by San Jose State University Special Library Association Student Chapter, also known as SLASC. Today's event is part of the SJSU Transforming Communities event series. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Aisha Abdul-Rahman, and I'm the programming director of SLASC. And I have my programming team with me. We have April today and Michelle, and then we have our bigger team, which is we have communication, we have marketing, we have a lot of people on our team that really help to make these events really special. So I want to thank everyone. We'd like to begin to recognize this event by recognizing that we are gathering virtually, but San Jose State University is located on the ethno-historic tribal territory of the Thaman Olone, who were direct ancestors and lineages enrolled in the Mokoema Olone tribe. I always mess up the pronunciation. And they were missions on the Santa Clara, San Jose, and Dolores. The lands on which San Jose State University is established was and continues to be significant to the Mokoema Olone tribe. And we want to recognize that the ancestors of this tribe constructed and maintained 3 Bay Area missions. So this spring, before I introduce our presenter, we curated kind of a diverse series of events to dedicate to engage with active members. So we had people from different types of libraries, different roles that we have. We asked various professionals with various levels of experience about their current role, their obstacles that they might have, and what advice they would give to new information professionals like ourselves. As April said, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat. And time permitting, we will make sure that we ask him the questions and make sure that we have time to get those questions answered for you. And then at the end of the event, I will have a survey link that I share, so you can let us know, if there's anything that we could have done better, give us your feedback about the event in general. So without further ado, I'm going to let Kim introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her background and where she started. I know I have tons of questions, but I feel like when she introduces herself, those questions will be answered. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much. Yeah. So my name is Kim Hayden. I am the senior archivist at the Center for Sacramento History, which is a regional archives. We're a government archives. We are the official repository for the city and the county of Sacramento, but we also collect personal papers, photos, films, stuff like that from the community. We're just trying to tell like a full story of the Sacramento region. So I am an MLIS SJSU alum. I graduated in 2011. And I started in 2008. It took me 3 years. I was working full time while I was doing it. And at that time, there were still in-person classes, but I couldn't take any of them because I was working full time. And I also couldn't really do very many there weren't a lot of internship opportunities available, because I only had weekends free. So my internship experience was just digitizing photographs, which is useful, but not super helpful when you are doing an online program that you really need hands-on experience with processing, like specifically in preservation and just like handling the materials. And I don't know, I thought I'm a visual learner. So for me, learning, processing, online was really hard, and I really needed to do it. And so after I graduated, I had a really hard time getting a job as an archivist, mostly because I didn't have processing experience. So I did I called it a postgraduate internship. I made that up, and I just basically went through the San Jose State internship list and found ones that had availability on the weekends, and I was able to process a collection at the San Francisco History Center, which is at the San Francisco Public Library. I lived in Alameda at the time, and that was it. Like right after I finished that, I got a job. My first job as an archivist was at the Computer History Museum, and I was a project archivist for a 2-year term. I finished that term and they hired me for another short-term project, but I ended up taking this position just a few months into that because this was a permanent position and I'm still here, almost 6 years later. So I thought that was a good call. I think we all hear that project archivist jobs are, like a stepping stone into the field, and they're frustrating because a lot of times they don't have benefits. Mine didn't have benefits. I lived alone in the Bay Area. Like I was living paycheck to paycheck and it sucked, but it really did give me good experience. So I was able to make that work for me, luckily, but not everyone can, of course. And so I am here at the Center for Sacramento History now. It's fabulous. I love it. I'm sitting in my cubicle right now where I've got lots of in-process things happening. I guess I'll tell you, before I did this job, or before I got my MLIS, I was a copy editor for 10 years. So I have a bachelor's degree in journalism from SF State, and I use that all the time in this job. I'm the office editor. I edit everything for everybody, and you're writing finding aids. It's good to have a concept of grammar and stuff like that. So I use that all the time. And yeah, I just worked at newspapers and newswires and a marketing company. And then after I got my MLIS, I forgot to mention, I worked at Stanford for a couple of years, just in the library, in Green Library, their biggest research library. And I checked books in and out. That was like the job I could get. It wasn't archives, but I met the archivists there who worked in that library and special collections, and I talked to them and I got their advice, and I became friends with them, and I'm still friends with them. So that was like useful networking, if anything, just being in a library building where there's archivists. And then I moved over to their data control section, which is just doing like copy cataloging for serials, like publications and stuff like that. And I did that for a little while, and then got that Computer History Museum job. So, and in that time, when I was struggling to find a job, I asked someone about certified archivist, and they said, yeah, do it. That'll help you get a job. Totally didn't help me get a job. I freely admit that I think the certified archivist designation is worthless. When you have an MLIS, you have the MLIS, like, what you're doing, I think it's just a hurdle, not a hurdle. I think it may have had its place at some point. And I know that some like smaller institutions see that and think like it's a big deal, but I really don't think it is, having had it. And I don't know. That's my opinion. I've done a whole panel about how I think it's worthless at SCA before. So a lot of people find it to be useful. I don't. I'm just throwing that out there. So yeah. So I guess I'll talk about what I do every day. We're a tiny staff, where there's 3 of us, and I'll just like take you into our vault so you can see the breadth of our collection. But yeah, so there's 3 of us trying to tackle a humongous collection with a humongous backlog. Before we got here, there weren't a lot of like archival best practices happening all the time here. There were it was a small shop, right? So it was like people who had more of a history background or historian background doing the archival work, and so it wasn't getting done how like we would do it. So there's a lot of problems that we have to fix. So yeah, let me turn my camera around and you can see our vault. Where is my camera turnaround thing? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. So this is our vault. It's pretty massive. This is one of 2. We have another offsite storage that's about this same size. This isn't all artifacts, as you can, I'm sorry, archival material. You can see that we've got artifacts too. Where should I even start? It's just massive, right? It's we've got all these movable shelves, all these filing cabinets are full of photographs. I have this Sacramento Daily Union from 1857 sitting out that I was photographing some articles from it. Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff. We've got the Sacramento Bee's photo morgue from the 1950s to 1980s. So photo rad in the Bee, we've got that photo. We've got all these bound copies of the Daily Union in Alta California. We've got maps upon maps upon maps, lots and lots of architectural drawings, which are these things up here. You will see that things are stored weird. The archives are not perfect. We're all underfunded and understaffed and have weird problems that are embarrassing, but it's life. Yeah, so we've got as a city and county archives, we collect government records that are of enduring value. So we don't take just everything, but we take a lot. I'll show you. Aisle 15 is a popular aisle for showing off our government records. We've got all court cases from county and city courts dating back to 1849 up through like the 1950s. Naturalization papers. So Sacramento County, you would get your citizenship at the county level from 1850 when we became a state up until the 1950s. So we've got just like all these are naturalization papers. So if your ancestor became a citizen in Sacramento County, we've got their citizenship papers, which is super cool for genealogists and such. These are just like books of deeds and mortgages. Wow. It's kind of massive and overwhelming. We've got like building permits, planning documents, divorce records, criminal records, coroner's records. And then we just have like all these really fabulous private collections, like the Sacramento Bee that I had mentioned. We have this gal, Eleanor McClatchy, of the McClatchy Company, which if you haven't heard of, was a big newspaper and media corporation. They owned, up until very recently, owned the Sacramento Bee and the Modesto Bee and the Fresno Bee. Now they're bankrupt. But anyway, she was a fabulous collector. She was the editor of the Bee from the 1930s. I'm sorry, the president of the Bee from the 1930s up to around 1980 when she died. But she was a fabulous collector of rare books and maps. So we've got all these just beautiful things that we wouldn't normally have because she collected them and gave them to us. But then we also, yeah.
Is there any connection to her and McClatchy High School?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, the name sounds familiar. Okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's the same family. Yeah, they're all over Sacramento. Her family came during the gold rush. Her grandfather was the Bee's. He was like their second editor, but within a few days of them starting, the first editor quit. So like he's basically like a founder of the Bee. And then it was in her family up until recently when they went bankrupt. But yeah, McClatchy Park, all McClatchy stuff is her family. And she's an awesome lady. I mean, she wasn't married, she traveled, she wanted to be a playwright. And then she like had to take over the family business and then just did that and was pretty badass. We're big fans of her. So we also have artifacts. This place was started by someone who was a collector. So a lot of the artifacts you see here really don't have a Sacramento connection. And our collecting scope is Sacramento, the city of Sacramento and Sacramento County. And so like that switchboard, that has a Sacramento connection, but like some things don't. And I'm grateful I don't have to deal with the artifacts. I just get to deal with the archives, but archives are the same boat. I have a student assistant helping me work on our ephemera collection, which turns out to have a lot of stuff that's not Sacramento related. There was the policy wasn't always, they didn't always do what they were supposed to do regarding collecting. And so a a lot of stuff, it was just like, oh, it's old, we should collect it. Which I think is kind of common, unfortunately, in our field. And so I'm spending a lot of time lately just trying to weed out that stuff and deaccession it. When we think about archives, right, we know that we don't item level catalog stuff. Like we put stuff in folders and the folder might have like 50 things in it, but that folder is just going to have one name. Here, they used to item level catalog everything. So that's another like mess we're trying to clean up. I know it's insane. It's totally insane. So we're really busy. You'll never be bored here ever. This is our like Isle of Doom where we just put stuff that we're like, don't know where to put yet or in progress. We have a lot of media, VHS film. We have millions and millions of feet of film from KOVR and KCRA, which are two of our news stations here. So yeah, lots of stuff. This is some of our processing area. We don't have a dedicated processing area for archivists, so we just put tables up and do it. I have a volunteer who's a recent MLIS, SJSU student graduate who wanted more experience. So she's here helping us process. This is the part of the Tower Records collection. If you all know what Tower Records was, it was like a huge global record store that started right here in Sacramento. So we've got, it's about 200 boxes. So we're tag teaming that right now. So this is like
that, the process of processing, how does that
look like? Totally good question. So this is a good example right here of just like one of the boxes that she's working on now. You can see that they have it organized, which is nice. They're not always organized. So we just went through and numbered the box and put a sticky that says to sort and file. And so what we're doing is we're just going through boxes to see what's in them. We did do an inventory, like a box by box inventory where we just said like, okay, box 137 has stuff on international stores in it. And so then we know we can sort that. In this case, since they have labeled stuff pretty well, we can pretty much just use those. And then we put them in our acid-free folders. And in the end, I'll show you a finished box, which isn't from that. It's from a different collection. But in the end, it looks all nice and organized, labeled, and we got our folder numbers over here. And but when it's not organized well like that, like, let's see. Oh, no, that's looking good. Another one. This is the fire department collection that a student is working on. Okay, here's a pretty good example. This box is just paper, right? It's not like, most of it isn't in folders. So in this case, you just literally have to go through it and see what the heck it is. And sometimes like all of these papers will be related and you can easily figure that out and put them in a folder. And maybe it'll be like, 4 folders worth of stuff. But sometimes they're not related and you have to start sorting. So, we're really big on piles. You make a lot of sorting piles, lots of colored sticky notes, just to like organize your piles. And then like, okay, right? So you make a series list, you figure out what your collection is about, you make your series list, and then you start sorting into those series. And so sometimes like the first box I showed you where it's pretty obvious what's in each folder, it's labeled well, it's easy to separate that into a series. But like these boxes are a little more chaotic. Okay, so these ones aren't chaotic because he's already done them. But the more chaotic ones, they require a lot more sorting. And yeah, you end up, so like this was my table. I was working with a collection for the last year. I was working on it. It was a really large collection. And I just had, this table was just piles and piles with sticky notes. And yeah, there's just like a lot of sorting. And then once you get it sorted, you start rehousing it into acid-free folders and acid-free boxes. And then you go from there and make your finding aid. So yeah, this is our processing space. This is some more of the Tower Records stuff. And then there's also a redevelopment project here. I'm not going to take you into this big cube that I keep walking by, but this is our cold storage. I'm not going to take you in there because my phone will die. But this is what it looks like inside. It's also 40 degrees, so I also don't want to go in there. But this is where we keep our film and our film negatives and photo negatives, so they don't perish out here in our vault. So our vault is not built for this purpose. Yeah, acid free. Wait, what'd you ask? I saw it pop up. What was it?
They said you use the phrase acid free a lot. Does that mean that our average folders and storage boxes have acid in them?
Yeah. So yeah, so we buy very specific materials, right? So like this paper, right? It's super acidic. Newspaper is the worst. It discolors everything it touches after a few years. So the acid in the paper will like degenerate the paper after a while and it'll break down. So we get, these are just a bunch of boxes of acid-free folders right here. Flattening in progress. I'll explain that in a sec. But yeah, we use these acid-free folders, which, you know, they say on the back that they're acid-free, and these acid-free boxes. And because, yeah, so what they do is they, what's the word? Like the opposite of acid, like neutralize. They neutralize the acid. So the way that they're made up so that it helps stop that deterioration. And we'll also use like acid-free paper to interleave between newspapers and things like that because those are so damaging. And like, yeah, so even things that are like the way things are housed, like this is not an acid-free box. It's full of, you know, just stuff. That stuff will deteriorate a lot faster than something that's in acid-free. And these are all building plans we just got from an architectural company here in town. And so they're all in these like old crappy cardboard tubes. So we're going to pull them all out of there. And we've got big poster rolls made of acid-free paper or acid-free cardboard. And over here is like gigantic acid-free folders for gigantic things. And then we've got like a million acid-free boxes. Yeah, acid-free, you're going to hear a lot of. I just actually found out when I was at SCA last month that in LA, there's like a rock band made up of archivists called Acid-Free. And I thought that was hilarious. Right? Yeah, so then, okay, I'm going to explain the flattening thing because that's interesting. And then I'm going to start talking about reference, which is why these are out. So I guess, yeah, the main things I do here are process collections and do reference. I don't digitize anything. I hate all digital stuff. I don't like working with the digital stuff. My coworkers do it. But you know, it's important to learn. So you should learn it. I like the analog things. Okay, so we're doing this flattening project as a preservation measure. We have these super high-tech Rubbermaid containers. And they're filled with water, like an inch, and they have these little risers and a screen, and you put things that are folded on here. Like, I'll show you what we have going right now. These are some of our earliest court records. They are from, they're from the 1850s. And so they've been stored in acid-free boxes, but folded up like this. Since 1850, right? So this one's 1851. So yeah, it's folded like this. So when you try to unroll it and read it, it's really difficult. It just like wants to close again. And then I dropped everything. That's the thing that happens sometimes when you're an archivist. You drop things even though you don't want to. Anyway, so you take these folded guys and you stick them in fancy Rubbermaid container with water for a few days. And the water vapor. Yeah. So like the water vapor penetrates the paper, not enough to like get it wet, but enough to relax the paper fibers. And then you can stick it under something heavy. So that's what's happening here under these boxes. You can see right here. That's one of those court cases. And it's just like flattening, and magically it'll be flat, and then we can put it in a folder and put it back in its box. So yeah, we do fun things like that. We have these books pulled for a reference appointment later this week. We do reference 2 days a week by appointment only. We kind of hate doing reference, honestly, because it gets in the way of your other work, but it's also the reason why we're here.
Right.
You know, like I became an archivist personally because I like to share information, and I think access to information is really important. And so, you know, doing reference is super crucial, but it gets annoying. But this stuff is all out. We have actually a production company coming to look at it. So supposedly the last slave case in California was tried here in Sacramento. If you didn't know that we had slaves in Sacramento, in California, we did. It wasn't legal, but it wasn't illegal. It just was not, you know, people didn't frown upon it so much. And so there was a little girl here who, she was 12, and she was owned by a guy here from Missouri, and people in the Black community here in 1864 found out about it. And one of the guys who was a founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church here, he sued to get her guardianship, and he won it. And so he got guardianship of her, and it was after emancipation. So it was like, yeah, it was considered to be the last slave case here. There were several slave cases in California of, because we had a Fugitive Slave Act here in California, in addition to the federal one. So you could technically still, basically it said like, if you came here with your slaves, they were still your property, even though California was a free state.
Right.
So anyway, we have a production coming later this week to film this stuff. And so what these are I know they're super boring looking, but they are from the 1860s, and they are property records that show who owned which property, you know, which blocks. This is like 21st and D Street right here. So they're tracing the ownership of the man who was able to get guardianship of that little girl, because they're trying to prove that he is owed reparations for his land being taken, they think, by the railroad company that came in. So anyway, we're helping them do their research on that, which is super cool to be a part of. So they're looking at these property records, and then they're looking at these gigantic newspapers for different articles in there.
So
And
let's have documents in archives versus libraries. How would you say, like records like this, how are they organized? Because these are they organized under his name, or like how would you go find them as the archivist and know that they're related?
Totally. Yes, that is such a good question. You don't. They're not organized by person. They're organized by, in this case, these are government documents and newspapers. So these are all city assessor books. And then this is the Daily Union. And I think this is the B. No, this is still the Union. So you don't know. And that's the detective work of archives, and why you want to have your stuff processed and have finding aids so you can find that stuff by like keyword searches. When you don't have your stuff processed and have finding aids, it's really hard to find. And we're in that boat because a lot of our collections aren't fully described. Right. So for this guy, Daniel Blue, we for the newspapers, actually for a lot of this, we searched the newspaper archives. Like, I don't know if you guys are aware of the California Digital Newspaper Collection, but it's a really amazing resource of digitized California newspapers. And so I send people to that a lot because you can really, you start there, you start getting information on like court cases, and you can find the date of a court case. And then from there, we can look in our court records and indexes and find the actual case file.
Okay.
Right. And then for the property records, we literally went through these year by year. We saw in the newspaper where he owned property. And so we just started going through them year by year and looking at the intersection, let's say it was 19th and B, looking at every year's page at 19th and B to see if his name was there.
So it's almost like the newspaper is your finding aid.
Yeah, in some cases. I mean, it's just like kind of a starting point to like, it's like a starting point to be able to find what you're looking for, basically, if you don't have that finding aid. And it's like, yeah, I tell people a lot, like, we don't have stuff organized by subject. So when you want to find out something about someone, you end up having to go to a lot of different collections.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to learn about one person, we've got the naturalization papers, we've got death papers, marriage papers. There's all these different places where you just have to go look for the person, basically, and piece it all together.
So someone asked, is everything organized by province?
By province? Provenance?
I think that's what they mean by provenance. Like, oh, I forgot the phrase. Like, we're told to just, respect that.
Oh, yeah.
Receive it in this order, keep it in that order, keep the collection together. Like, we receive this from this donor, we receive this from this donor. You don't want to mix them together.
Yep, totally. Absolutely. Yeah, we absolutely do that. So with our government records, everything is kept by department. From there, we, so like, the assessor map books I was just showing you, those are all in one big assessor collection. And it consists of those books, some street assessment books, and some other types of records. So they're all together in that. And there's also a county assessor collection. And like, we wouldn't mingle them, even though the county assessor has assessment books on just the city of Sacramento. Like, we keep those in the county one because that's who created it. Yeah, we try to keep things by creator, by who gave it to us, by that provenance of what its purpose was when it was created. We have a few artificial collections, but that's really rare. And when I say that, I mean like where we not really imposed an order, because sometimes you do have to impose an order when you're processing. Like, if you get something that you've got, let's say 10 boxes of stuff, someone just threw it in the boxes and it's not in any kind of order, and they didn't have an order for it, you can impose an order. You can say like, okay, I'm going to put all these types of documents together and all these types of documents together. That's okay, right? Because there was no order and you have to make an order for it. But we do have a few artificial collections, which I mean, when I say that we put things together into a collection, not by creator or donor. And so that would be our yearbook collection, because it's helpful to have a finding aid that lists all of the yearbooks in all of the collections, instead of having to go like collection by collection to find one. Right. So they still live in their original collections, like the donor, whoever donated them, but we have like an artificial finding aid of them. And that's the same with our ephemera. We just created a big ephemera collection, and all the ephemera that we find, we're doing an inventory of our archival holdings right now. And so all the inventory we find goes into that, because it doesn't really have provenance. It's ephemera, right? It's not telling a larger story. It's not part of, a creator's life. It's just like a slip of paper. And so we've created an artificial collection for that stuff.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was provenance. I was mispronouncing the word.
That's okay.
So one question that I have is about disaster preparedness. So
Yeah.
I've been there physically, and it's a massive building.
Yeah.
And from a couple of archivists that I've talked to, I'm finding that a lot of places don't have anything in process. Do you guys have something?
We do actually. We have a disaster plan, and it's in a binder and it's accessible by everybody. And we have a plan. So we have like a phone tree, if there is a disaster or an emergency, of who contacts who and who is in charge of what. And then we have a list of our most like irreplaceable precious items that if there's a fire or a flood, we run in and we grab those things. And then otherwise we have sprinklers and, that kind of stuff. We are in a floodplain, which is unfortunate. We are trying to get a new building, but archives are well understood and appreciated by anyone, especially the city government in our case. So it's hard to fight for ourselves to get a better place. We don't have proper environmental controls in here, which is a problem here in Sacramento. It gets over 110 in the summer, and 3 times last year our air conditioning failed during the summer, and it got over 85 degrees in this room, which is a disaster. I mean, that's disastrous. Yeah, that's terrible. And so we are just harping on the city over and over again, like, we need a new building. You put us in charge of these materials in the public trust, but we can't properly house them and protect them without, the proper housing, like literal house.
So one question someone asked is they love to hear more about how archives are funded and what portion of the funding comes from the city and what portion comes from the private donors, and if you are involved in any grant writing or grant funded projects.
Yeah, so almost all of our funding is from the city. We're a division of the city. We're under the Convention and Cultural Services Department, but we get a small amount of funding from the county every year because we hold their stuff, so they give us money for that. And then we do some grant writing. I've only done myself written very small grants, which for California Revealed, which is a state-run project that helps you get things digitized and helps you catalog. It's run through the state library, and it's a really great program. But other people here have written larger grants, mostly for disaster preparedness or to get this cold storage unit. We had to get a grant for that, and for like assessments, preservation assessments and things like that. I've been wanting to get a processing grant because we have such a backlog, but they're just really hard to find. A lot of stuff is focused on digitization these days. So yeah, I think we're a little different than other archives where we are funded, we're government, we're funded by the government. Donors really don't provide much at all in the way of funding. Every once in a while, someone will give some money with their donation, but it's not ever enough to really go far. Like, it might cover cost of materials, like buying those acid-free folders, but it doesn't ever cover like processing.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that you face today?
Honestly, it's like manpower. There's 3 of us, and you've seen, how much stuff we have. We really rely on like student help. We are able to pay a limited number of students to work here part-time, and then we have volunteers and interns who aren't paid, but finding people to help process, we have so much needs to be processed, and I don't want just anyone doing it. We here in Sacramento, we have a public history program, and a lot of those students want to come intern or volunteer with us, but they don't have a processing background or understanding. It's not like all of us, you guys and me, we took processing classes and have that understanding of the provenance and keeping things in order, and we don't have the time to teach someone that. So quick plug, if you're looking to get some experience, come over here. We're always looking for help. But yeah, I think just like not having enough people and feeling kind of overwhelmed with the work, and just not having the support. Like, my boss is supportive, but the people who make the decisions for funding and staffing, they just don't really get how important we are, I think, and competing with other city services.
What do you consider like the most important skills that archivists could have? So like students that, like us, we're told take as many electives as possible.
Yeah.
What do you find like the most important skills that are needed?
What do you hear? Like, what are you told? Like, to take? Like, what classes are you told to take are important? Just
not to box ourselves in, to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and not to really specialize in anything, but to just learn as much as you can of every different area.
I think that's totally true. I think that, yeah, that's what I would say too. Like, when I first wanted to get this degree, I wanted to be, I wanted to specialize in film archives. Like, that's what I was really interested in. And, you know, there's that at UCLA, and I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. But then when I thought about it more, it was like, there's probably like 5 jobs for a film archivist, right? Like, between here and like New York. And I want to live in, you know, I'm from California. I want to live in California. Like, I don't want to live in LA. I want to live in Northern California. So it's like, yeah, there's not going to be a job for that, right? So I just, like, you know, went more general with the archivist program. But that's what I did. I just took a little bit of everything. And I took the classes that I wasn't interested in, like reference. I really didn't want to do reference. I'm shy. I'm an introvert. Like, I don't want to talk to people all day, you know? I want to just like sit in the back and process collections by myself, or with my team. And then like digital curation and digital classes, I wasn't interested, but I took them so I'd have an understanding. It could at least like sound like I knew what I was talking about, right? And like, and also like know what I'm talking about, even if I don't have that experience. So yeah, I think that's really important. For me, the most is reference. Like, taking that class was really helpful in understanding like the reference interview and how to help somebody who doesn't really know necessarily how to explain what they need. Because you come across that a lot. Like, there are people who are like pro researchers who've been doing this a lot, and they know how to ask for what they're looking for. And then you have just like regular people like us, right? Who are like, I want to know about my house or about my family, but they don't really know the questions to ask. And so the reference class I took there, and granted this was, you know, over 10 years ago, but it was super helpful in telling you like how to do the reference interview and how to like draw out what the person is looking for, like draw it out of them by asking open-ended questions and like just understanding like what they might be looking for. And then the processing class was super helpful too, just to like understand that basis of the theory of processing, even though I didn't get to do it hands-on, you know, at school, just to like understand it.
I was wondering, what, I guess, changes have you seen over time, like within your career in general, what you do, but then kind of like overall, what changes do you see in terms of archivists?
We're definitely getting more born digital material, and we're digitizing a lot of stuff. We have, gosh, probably 5 volunteers or interns digitizing every week. We just are making so many digital files, and we're receiving digital files, and just how to deal with those. And, you know, storage is expensive. Yeah. So that's like a real challenge of like, figure out how to organize them, fighting for more storage all the time. The city is always like, you're using so much storage. It's like, oh, no, but we have to, you know, because when you're saving stuff preservation quality, it's going to be a huge file. So that's been really big. Probably the biggest change I've seen. And it's not really like it didn't happen overnight. It's been happening, you know, it's just like more and more, we're getting more digital stuff, and just trying to figure out like how to process it. Like, the collection I just finished processing, it was about 100 linear feet. It was pretty big. It took me like the last year to work on it. And in the end, the donor was like, oh, I've got my digital files for you too. And so he sent me those, and it was, I'd never processed anything with digital files. So I was like, well, how am I going to do this? Like, where do I put these in the finding aid? And like, I really had to think about it and like talk it through with my coworkers. And they never had either. So it's like these new things that are coming up where we're just not quite sure what to do. And we figured it out, and it was great. And the other thing is we're talking more about community archives and how, as archivists and like a larger institution, we can support community archives, and we can support communities that don't necessarily want to house their material, you know, with us. They want to keep it with their community. That's been a challenge to like as a place that wants to like collect everything and collect the whole story of Sacramento. Like the idea of like, well, someone is going to keep their stuff and we can try to help them with the preservation and with the access, but we don't really have the funding to like do that, and just like trying to figure out like how to best support that, has been a real challenge, and like a new thing that's like kind of a new concept in this field.
Yeah. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to share them in the chat. My last question that I have is, what's your approach to professional development, balancing, working? You mentioned that you worked while you went to school. So balancing working while also making sure that you stay up to date with, all the new technology and everything that's changing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, fully keep up with everything, if I'm totally honest. Like, I try, but like, I don't. But I am a member of SCA and SAA. I go to SCA religiously every year. I have presented at SCA for the last few years. I have served on committees for SCA. I feel like that networking, like if you're not into networking, forcing yourself to network, I think it's really important. Like, I was on the publications committee for 5 years. I was on where I was on the editorial board of the Journal of Western Archives. So I was peer reviewing articles for them. And so I read a lot of articles. That was helpful. Yeah, reading those things and just talking to people, honestly. Like, I think, especially at SCA, when you get to meet up with people you've worked with before or new people and just like talk about the challenges you're facing, and just having like a group of people. Some of us don't have coworkers and that can be a challenge, but just like putting yourself out there to like be involved in the field and just like talking to people is helpful.
All right. So a lot of us identify as introverts, and you yourself said that you're an introvert.
Yes.
Do you find that those events and talking with like-minded people is easier being an introvert, or help at all? Or do you have any tips for us? Like, I don't look forward to those things, but I know I need to do them.
No, I don't. I mean, it's exactly that. It's that feeling. It doesn't feel any better. It's like, in a way, it's worse because we're all awkward, right? So then it's like we're all awkwardly mingling. When I first started going to them, my coworker / friend and I would just like have some drinks before we went to the reception because like we're shy and it's awkward. But the more you go, the more you see people, and serving on the committees, I think, is really helpful because you start working with people from outside of your organization. I think the local arrangements committee is a great one to be on because you're like right in the middle of it during the conferences, and you're working with people and you're talking to people, like working at the like volunteering at the registration table, for instance. You're sitting there for like 2 hours with people you don't know. You have to talk to them. It sucks, but you do it. And then you're talking to all the people who come up, and like you're like putting faces to names. And yeah, I don't have any tips to make that easier. It's just hard. It's exhausting. Like, I find it exhausting every year, but I do it and it's fun, but like I hate it at the same time.
So Erin asked, so she talked a little bit about this already. Erin, I don't know if you came in a little late. She's asking about, would you recommend the archivist certification outside of school? So tell us why you didn't like it. So she didn't go into detail, Erin, but she just said that she doesn't recommend it. So tell us why.
So first, I don't want to like, my word is not like, the final word. Like, it's my opinion. It might be totally good for you. In my opinion, I thought, like, I have an MLIS. I've learned all these things. Okay, so when you do the certified archivist test, it's this long, I think it was like an hour or 2 hours long test. It's a lot of studying. It's a real pain. And then you do it, and then you just have this certified archivist designation. And
Oh, Kim, I think we lost your audio.
oh no.
Okay, let's try it again.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So you're saying it's a long test, and then we lost you.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, it's a long test and there's a lot of studying and it's stressful. And then I just don't feel like you get a lot out of it when you already have an MLIS. If you don't have an MLIS, then yeah, maybe that would be something that could show that you have that knowledge. But I feel like most jobs that, I mean, I haven't applied for a job in a while because I've been here and I really like this job. But I applied to like 8 million jobs before. And I feel like almost all of them were MLIS from an accredited school, right?
Mhm.
You don't see the CA designation very often, or it's like, MLIS, and then maybe this too.
Mhm.
I just feel like when you have an MLIS and when you've gotten like maybe a job under your belt as experience, you don't need that. You already know that. And I think that proves it. I think just having the MLIS and having a job shows that you know what you're doing.
So you've mentioned a few times that it took you a little while to find a job. Do you think that that's changed now? How can you share with us like how long or any like tips like once you found it like, oh, if I would have done this different, maybe I could have got a job sooner?
Yeah, honestly, I think if I had had processing experience, I would have gotten a job sooner. Like it took me, okay, this is going to be really demoralizing, but it was 4 years between when I graduated and when I got an archivist job.
Mm.
And I was working at Stanford for 2 of those years in the library. So I was in the field, but not doing what I wanted to do. And yeah, I think it was not having processing experience because as soon as I got that processing experience, I got a job
Okay.
like right away. Because when you don't have hands-on experience, and I help with hiring here. I sit on panels for archivist positions here, and if someone doesn't have like hands-on experience, we're not going to consider them. And that's what was happening to me. I'm sure of it because yeah.
Do you think that they considered the work that you did at the library? So, okay, maybe you've done internship at a library, but not at an archives.
I don't think so. And when I think about that, like I wouldn't consider that because it's totally different. Like archives work is so different from libraries. And it's like, yeah, you're in the field and you're closer to the archives, but it's just such different work. Like, processing is so specific.
That's good to know.
That's my 2 cents on that, I think. But it also depends on if that's what you want. Like, do you want to do processing? Because there's jobs where you don't process. So I think, yeah, just getting that hands-on experience, either through an internship or just volunteering, if you can have the time to do that, is what really helps.
Okay, I'm in Sacramento. I'm gonna come volunteer.
Yes.
I'm definitely gonna come volunteer. I've worked at libraries. I've had internships at libraries, but not at archives, so that's good to know.
Yeah, totally.
One question Serene wants to know, can grant writing be taught to entry-level archivists if they didn't have time to take the class during library school?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I didn't take the class and um it just comes up every once in a while where it's like, oh, we need a grant here. When we do grant writing here, we often will take different parts of it because sometimes the grant writing part is they're huge. There's many components to it. And so we'll each get assigned a part. And so like I've written a part for some of them and I, mentioned I was an editor. So I usually end up editing the full grant when it's done. And no one here that I know of has any grant writing experience. You just kind of figure it out.
Right.
I think that, when you see on a job listing like grant writing experience, how do you get that? You just write a grant. And I don't know, not having taken a class, I don't know like what that class would be like.
So I'm currently in the class, and basically we've gone through the steps. The class is basically writing a grant. You learn the different sections and the different expectations and the different types of grants, and you look at example grant proposals, and you basically spend the semester writing your grant. You pick a section, and you're given the assignment to work on it, get feedback from your classmates. Last week, I submitted my final grant proposal, and then this week we're presenting it to our class for feedback. And that is pretty much the class, is you are actually writing a grant. I was able to get the COVID relief grant for the artists in Sacramento by fluke. I had no idea what I was doing. And I think that having the grant class, I think I could have taught myself, but I'm more confident because I did it. And then I also had someone who writes grants to look at what I'm writing and tell me that I was doing a good job. So I feel like I'm happy that I took the class and I'm more confident versus if I'm questioning, oh, am I doing this right? Is this the right way to do it? I feel a lot more confident now.
That makes sense. What you just described sounds like a great class. My boss here has written a lot of grants, so like us, archivists, we haven't, but she has, and so she usually is like the lead on it.
Mhm.
And yeah, if she weren't the lead on it, I would think I would feel kind of lost, honestly. Like they're complicated and long, and I would not feel as confident either if there wasn't someone else who was like had that experience. Now that I've helped with grants a few times, I think I would feel more comfortable just doing it on my own, but they're pretty intimidating, honestly, some of them.
Yeah, they are. They're very intimidating. I don't have any other questions. Do you guys have any more questions? So I was really surprised to learn so much more today. So, because I've been there physically and I remember seeing like the hats and the big signs and the fax machine. So even though I've been there before, I learned so much today. So thank you so much for taking us on a tour. I had no idea about all the other stuff. Like there's so much that's there.
Yeah, usually when we do archives crawl every year, and that's when we're open to the public. Is that when you came? Or did you come during?
I came with Professor Pose because I did the library science certificate.
Oh yeah, cool.
And so kind of like for a field trip, she brought us to you.
Yeah. So a lot of times when we do the tours in here, we focus on the artifacts because that's what people are drawn to. They're interesting to look at. The archives are in boxes, right? Like,
yeah,
they're not out and about, and then they're just like pieces of paper. Just people aren't as drawn to them, so we end up focusing and interesting. But
there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad. Like, I love doing these types of tours and presentations where I can like talk more about what I do and what we have here, because it's fascinating and it's a really amazing collection. There's not a lot of like regional government and personal collections like this, like, or repositories like this. It's really awesome.
Yeah, I think it's really great. And I think that the idea of having like the community collection, it feels like maybe that's where things are headed. It might be able to resolve some of the problems like with the backlog and things like that. I think it's really great. I've been doing a lot of reading and trying to learn about that aspect or like that approach. So I think that would be really great.
It would be. And it's like those of us who've been trained like a little earlier, like in, like, you have to be the steward of the item. This repository, if you're going to let us digitize it, we have to own it. Like, it's hard for us to wrap our brains around, this idea that there's another way to do it and that it's okay to do it that way. And so the more we talk about it, the more it's like, yeah, okay, we could do that, and it's really interesting. And I think it's exciting if, we can figure it all out.
Yeah. I think it's amazing to just see how things have changed and the growth and just trying to plan for the future when you don't know it yet.
Totally.
Yeah. So Marissa says, this was wonderful. I love the literal virtual tour of the archives. Thank you, Kim.
Yay, thanks.
All right, guys, that is about it. I'm going to post the link to the survey. If you guys want to give us some feedback, let us know about how everything was. And anything else that we can do to make these events better. Thank you so much, Kim, for joining us this evening. And once the semester is over, I'm enrolled. I'm going to take 4 classes over the summer.
Oh God. Okay.
Next semester, I will be there knocking to come volunteer because I think that now knowing that just because you worked in libraries, they are completely different. So
yeah, and I will say too, like when we have volunteers or interns or anyone like with a library science background or enrolled or whatever, someone who's interested in this as a field, like we really will cater it to what you want to do. It's not like us telling you like this is what we want you to do. It's like, what are you interested in? And will make a project of that for you so that you can get the experience you want. Yeah.
Nice. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, guys, if you're in the Sacramento area, definitely come take a tour. I know Southern California is far, but it's definitely worth it. So when there's those public tours, definitely check it out. All right, guys, have a good night.
Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you, Kim. That was wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Here's the survey link again, guys. I accidentally sent it just to Erin. All right, guys, have a good night.